Hi, my name is Nathan. You're watching Nice at Dice, and today I'm taking a look at this game, Maquis. It's a small solo-only game. It's a worker placement game, and it is about the French resistance called the Maquis fighting against the German occupation during World War II. So it has kind of this war game type of theme going on, but really it doesn't play like your typical war game. It's definitely a worker placement game. Now that's interesting because it's also, like I said, a solo-only game. And I have never before seen a solo only worker placement game. Kind of a unique concept to me. So it was very interesting to see how this game works. I want to share a little bit of that with you and then give you my overall thoughts on the game. All right, so this is an example of a setup for the game Maquis. I'll just point out right away that it's a very small game. All right, comes in a small box, has a pretty small, straightforward rule book. Very quick to set up and pretty quick to play. You can definitely play a game in under an hour, maybe even 30, 35 minutes. Would be pretty typical. The game revolves primarily around this board. This board is just a map of a town. You have a river running through it, and you have these various locations on the map. Some of the locations just have a name, like this one, Pont-l'Évêque, and I apologize, but I do not know any French, so I could be completely mispronouncing that. And I apologize if I am. Please bear with me. But you have locations like that, Pont-l'Évêque, Pont du Nord up here, and they don't do anything except act as like a stepping stone for moving between other places. And then you have the majority of the places that have some kind of function when you go to them. For example, you have the grocer here. Sending a worker to the grocer will get you food. You have the doctor over here. Sending a worker to the doctor will get you medicine. You have the black market, which lets you spend either a food or a medicine for money, but at the cost of morale, which I'll get to in a minute. Or you have the poor district here, where you can spend a food and a food and a medicine to improve your morale. You also have places like the fence here, which lets you spend your money to get weapons, and so forth. Three really important places are the cafe, which lets you spend food to recruit another worker. The radios, there's two of them, Radio A and Radio B. Both of these radios let you either come back with one of these intel tokens or call for supplies to be dropped on one of these fields, which is the third really important place. What you can have dropped on these fields is either 1 money, 1 weapon, or 3 food. Okay? Also, there are these spare rooms. There's 3 of them on the board, and these are like slightly indented spaces. If you send a worker to one of these spare rooms, you can spend 2 money to put one of these spare room tiles into that location. These all do different things. This one, for example, is another safe house. This is a safe house down here. I'll explain what safe houses do in a moment, but you could put another safe house there. You could put, for example, a pharmacist, which lets you exchange 2 medicine for poison. You have a counterfeiter, which lets you just generate some more money. You have a chemist, which lets you trade a medicine for a bomb, and so forth. So you can put those into the spare rooms. That's basically what's going on this board. You also have this little track down here, which tracks the days. You start out at the top and you work your way down, and when you get to the end of this track, the game is over. Hopefully you've accomplished your missions by then, because that's what you need to do to win the game. I mentioned morale earlier, so let's talk about that over here real quick. You have a little sideboard, and on this sideboard you have a token here to track morale. Your morale starts at 6. If it gets all the way to the bottom, then you lose the game. And you also have a place to track soldiers, which starts at 0 and can go up to 5. Every time soldiers goes up, your morale goes down, so you want to avoid them sending soldiers into the town, basically. And I'll also explain a little bit about what the soldiers actually do when they're here. Before I get to that, let's talk about missions, because missions are really the object of the game. You're going to have 2 mission cards that you need to complete in order to win the game. There's a whole bunch of these mission cards. They all have different number of stars on the back of them. This is a 1-star card. This is a 2-star card that indicates the general difficulty of it. So you can mix and match these to adjust the difficulty of the game, and just to create variety. And each of these is going to give you an objective. So, for example, this one gives you the objective that by the time this gets to the bottom at the end of the game, you need to have 3 of these weapon tokens, and you need to have your morale at no less than 4. Okay, so that's that mission. This mission is actually going to act as another location attached to the board here, and you have to send a worker to this location 3 times on 3 different days, and the 3rd time he needs to come with one of these bomb tokens. So that is how that mission's accomplished. What you're doing on a turn-by-turn basis is you have 3 workers that you start out with, and they start out at your safe house down here at the bottom. You're going to send them out to different locations. So for example, we'll send one guy to Pont-l'Évêque here. Pont-l'Évêque doesn't do anything in its own, but we're going to send him there to keep the opponent's workers out. So the opponent has 2 types of workers. He has these blue workers, which are basically like your military police, and he has these red workers, which are the soldiers. He starts out with just the blue workers. So he's going to flip a card over from this deck. This is called the patrol deck, and that's going to give you 3 locations on it. So he's going to try to send his worker to the first location on this card, which is Radio B up here in this corner. If Radio B were occupied, he'd go for the next location, which is the grocer right here. And if that were occupied, he would go for the black market, which is right there. Let's say I had my guys like this, and this card came out. He would check Radio B. Oh, that's occupied. The grocer is occupied. The black market is occupied. So then he'd start again from the top, and he would look for a place where it's occupied by one of my guys. So Radio B, nope, that's occupied by one of his. The grocer, oh, that's occupied by one of mine. So he is going to knock my guy out, put his guy in there, and my guy that got knocked out got arrested. I would lose him for the rest of the game. Couldn't get him back in any way. Okay? That's how that would work. But let's back it up and just say that's the card that came out. Put someone in Radio B. For my next move, I'm going to go to Radio A. His next move, he's going to send someone to the grocer. My next move, I'm going to go to the doctor. All right? His next move, he's going to try and send someone to Pont-l'Évêque. I've already got someone there. His second option is the black market. So that's where he's going to send his guy. All right? Now all our guys are out. My guys need to see if they can make it back to the safe house. This guy can do that. This guy can do that. This guy can do that. So we're all coming back safely. This guy comes back with nothing. This guy comes back with 1 medicine from the doctor. And this guy comes back having used the radio to call for a drop. And he's going to call for some money to be dropped in this field. All right? Now, let's say, for example, I had these 2 guys at the radio and the doctor, and he had a guy in Pont-l'Évêque. These 2 guys couldn't make it back to the safe house, so they would both get arrested, and I would lose them for the rest of the game. All right? That'd be really bad. But fortunately, that didn't happen. So now here we are. These guys are going to go away. This is going to move down to the next day, and we're going to start again on the next day. So now maybe for my first move, I'm going to go to the grocer. His first move, he's going to go to Pont-l'Évêque. My next move, I'm going to go to the field here to pick up that money. He's going to go to Radio A. And maybe I'll go ahead and go to the black market. All right, and then his guy is going to go, let's see, he would go to Radio A, but that's already occupied. Pont-l'Évêque is already occupied. Oh, black market is the 3rd option. He's going to boot me out of there. My guy got arrested. All right, so now this guy can come back with this money. This guy can come back with these groceries, and so forth and so on. Again, what we're trying to accomplish is finish these 2 missions, which involves going to this place 3 times. The 3rd time we need to take a bomb. And at the end of the game, we need 3 of these weapons, and we need our morale to be no less than 4 in order to accomplish that mission. Other missions will have other objectives. You got to acquire different things like these fake IDs, maybe some poison somebody. You have these little anti-air guns that might be put on the board, and you have to go attack them to blow them up. And so forth, right? So lots of different objectives. Some of the objectives have like time limits, things that have to happen on certain days on this track, and so forth. One real quick thing to show you is, let's say I was at Radio B here, and there was a guy at the black market, and I need to get back to the safe house at the end of the day. If I have one of these guns, I can discard the gun. I shoot this guy, he is gone, and I get back safely. However, now that I have shot this guy, we're going to move this marker up one. That's going to cause the morale to go down one, and we're going to bring out one of these soldiers. So now we have a soldier. And so now when the opponent is putting out guys, he's going to start with his blue guys, his police, and then he's going to put out his soldiers last. And the soldiers cannot be shot, so there's no way to get past soldiers. So that is that. Basically the gist of the game. We'll go back up top and I'll give you my thoughts on it. All right, so hopefully that gives you a good overview of how the game is played. I'm going to say right away, this is a really interesting game. It's very fascinating. Again, like I said before, the idea of a worker placement solo game is pretty unique to me. Now, the thing about a worker placement game, I like that mechanism, and I'm used to kind of this idea in a worker placement game where you're looking to put out your own workers, you know, where you want to put them to accomplish things, but you're also trying to keep in mind, like, well, what is my opponent doing? Where might they want to put out their workers? Sometimes I'll unintentionally block an opponent, but sometimes I'll actively try to block an opponent to keep them from getting the resources they need or what have you. This, you're just playing against a deck of cards, so you can't really read your opponent, but you also kind of can, because you can track what cards come out of the patrol deck, and therefore you can know what cards are still in the patrol deck. And in fact, on page 10 of the rulebook here, they give you this little chart. Down here, it shows basically what the locations are on all 10 of those cards. And I mean, they don't discourage you from keeping track of the cards in that way. So I usually keep this open, and I'll put like just some little markers or something on here as the cards come out, so it's easier to keep track of what cards have come out of the deck, what cards are still in the deck. So then you're really counting cards and using that information to see, okay, what are the odds of me being safe if I go here or go there, what have you. Now, at first, that struck me as really weird, because I've played other games where you do count cards to some extent, like, for example, in basically any version of the game Pandemic, you are going to some extent, you're going to count cards as they come out of that infection deck, right? You're going to see, like, well, if the New York cards come out of the infection deck, then I don't need to worry about more disease cubes being added to New York, right? That's how that game works. So there's a little bit of card counting in other games, but I've always felt like it was a much smaller part of those games. Whereas in this game, it's really like one of the biggest things in the game is counting cards and, you know, using that to track where your opponent might come out and what that means for where you can risk putting your guys. And at first that felt really weird to me, but after I kind of got over the weirdness of it, it's interesting. It's an interesting mechanism. I don't know how else you could really accomplish that same feel of a worker placement game without something like that. That feeling of like, I want to send my workers out to different places, but I also want to keep in mind what my opponent might do and see where I need to block them or whatever, right? So that's interesting. And it also creates some really interesting choices. Like, one of my favorite situations that I've had in this game was a situation where, because of the cards that had already come out, the cards that were still in the deck, where I had guys on the board and where they might put their guys on the board, I'm looking at it all and I'm contemplating, like, okay, I could put a guy on this location. If I don't, there is a 20% chance that I'll lose 2 of my guys. If I put this guy on the board in this particular spot, now there's a 30% chance that I'll lose 1 of my guys. So do I want to take the better odds but risk 2 guys? Or do I want to take the slightly worse odds but only be risking 1 guy? You know, like, that's an interesting decision. And it's those types of decisions come up fairly often when you're playing this game. The time pressure of having to complete it in a certain number of rounds is really what does that. If you didn't have that time pressure, the game would become very dull because you could always just play it safe and only go for stuff when you're absolutely sure that it'll be a safe move. But the time pressure, really keeps it so that you have to make those calculated risks at time. And choosing when to make those calculated risks is really one of the interesting and exciting parts of the game. I really like the variety of missions. There's a good variety of missions. So there's, I think, at least a dozen mission cards, and at different difficulty levels. And it's nice how you can kind of mix and match the cards as you like in order to create the difficulty that you want. There's 2 cards that are like 0 stars, which means they're super easy. And that was the first game I played. I used both of those. That's what they recommend for like your learning game. And it was so easy. It was like I was finished in like 5 rounds or something. Then I went on to like 2 1-star games, 2 1-star missions, and then it was like, okay, this is how the game's supposed to feel. It's a little more challenging. And then you work your way up to like the 3-star missions, and those are really challenging. I've been able to play and complete each of the missions. One of the 3rd-star missions was really difficult, and I think that was another point that kind of creates a bit of like this is going to hit you either good or bad depending on how you feel about it. But in that particular mission, I tried it 3 or 4 times, and the first 2 times I got to a point where I was all set to win the game. The only thing that could stop me from winning is if out of like the 4 possible cards I could draw, I drew one of them. So there's 25% chance that I'd lose the game from a random draw of the card. Otherwise, I was set. And of course, both of those times I drew that one card that would ruin the whole game for me. So I found that a little bit frustrating because, especially because like twice consistently I got to that point. And so now it's like, okay, I could keep playing this scenario over and over and over again, and eventually I'll beat the odds just because of the random nature of the drawing the cards. But then it's like that one time that I beat the odds, did I really do any better than all the times I lost? So it's like, did I really win or did I not? Did I just get lucky? And the times that I lost, did I really lose or did I just get unlucky? Like, it's kind of weird. I don't really know how to feel about that. A lot of the other scenarios in the game, it's like there's a point where you get to the point where you're like, okay, so on this last round, I just got to send like 1 worker to this place to finish the mission, and it doesn't even matter if he gets arrested. He'll still have finished the mission, so I've basically won. And that's how most of the games ended for me when I got to that kind of point where it's like, okay, I've won. I could play out the next couple of rounds if I wanted to just finish things off, but I've already won. And that felt more satisfying, although it didn't feel as tense. Like you had moments of tension throughout the game, but you didn't have that tension at the last moment where it's like, okay, this is my last chance. I've got to not draw this one card and I will have won, but then you draw that card and it screws you over. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it because it makes it feel like when you do win that scenario because you happen to not draw the wrong card, then it feels kind of like, did I really win or did I just got lucky? But at the same time, that kind of tension is fun. It makes it exciting. One thing I will say that's nice about the game is it is very quick to set up and it's very quick to reset. It's even quicker to reset than it is to set up. So if you're playing a scenario and you lose, it's very quick to reset the game and just start over. Even if you get like 5 or 6 rounds into a game and you realize you made a terrible mistake and you're not going to be able to win, like you can keep playing if you want to try and make a comeback, but it's also just as easy to reset and start over. So I'd say that's a perk of the game. Yeah. Overall, I think it's a really cool game. It's a lot of fun. I've played it at least a dozen times, like I said, and I've played through all the missions, and I've managed to win at all the missions. I will say I don't feel like I'm real compelled to come back and play the game again, having won against all the missions. I feel like I've kind of solved all the puzzles that the game has given me to solve. So, but I don't feel like that's a bad thing. Like I paid a reasonable price for the game, and I got a reasonable amount of play out of it. I feel like with solo games, it's kind of hard to maintain, you know, the replayability unless you just continue to add more content to the game, right? I have other solo games that have a lot of expansions, and so, you know, I keep coming back to those games because there's always more content to explore. That's not the case here. So you're gonna, at least in my case, I played through all the content that's available, and now I feel like I've solved all the puzzles that the game has to give me. So probably going to be passing this game on to somebody else now, but I would say overall I recommend the game. You might find that it's more replayable than I do, but even if you just play through all the different missions, you know, till you've beaten all the different missions, I mean, that's still pretty good. I think that's a good return for your investment on this game. So, in any case, that is Maquis. It's a fun game, very small, solo only. If any of that sounds appealing to you, I think you might enjoy it. Thank you again for watching. My name is Nathan. This is Nice at Dice, and you enjoy the rest of your day.